Welcome to No Longer Conformed. I'm Erik Garthe, and we are studying Talking to God, a study on the principles of prayer. Based on the book by Ron Dunn, Don't Just Stand There, Pray Something. In this session, we'll be looking at Philippians chapter 1, verses 3 through 7, Power in the Prayers of the Saints. Someone once said, the mightiest thing you can do for a man is to pray for him. In Acts chapter 12, if you turn there with me, let's visit an important event in the early church. King Herod killed the apostle James, and he saw that it pleased the Jews. So he decided to grab Peter next. Look at verses 1 through 3 of Acts chapter 12. Now, about that time, Herod the king stretched out his hand to harass some from the church. Then he killed James, the brother of John, with the sword. And because he saw that it pleased the Jews, he proceeded further to seize Peter also. Now it was during the days of unleavened bread. The situation is then explained in verses 4 and 6. So when he had arrested him, he put him in prison and delivered him to 4 squads of soldiers to keep him, intending to bring him before the people after Passover. And then verse 6, and when Herod was about to bring him out, that night Peter was sleeping, bound with 2 chains between 2 soldiers, and the guards before the door were keeping the prison. I tell you, it sure did not look good for the apostle. But what? Well, look at verse 5. Peter was therefore kept in prison, but constant prayer was offered to God for him by the church. Conflict. It's the world versus the church. Political power versus spiritual power. This reads like a good book. Look at the drama in verses 7 to 12. Now behold, an angel of the Lord stood by him, and a light shone in the prison, and he struck Peter on the side and raised him up, saying, arise quickly. And his chains fell off his hands. Then the angel said to him, gird yourself and tie on your sandals. And so he did. And he said to him, put on your garment and follow me. So he went out and followed him, and did not know that what was done by the angel was real, but thought he was seeing a vision. When they were past the first and second guard posts, they came to the iron gate that leads to the city, which opened to them of its own accord. And they went out and went down one street, and immediately the angel departed from him. And when Peter had come to himself, he said, now I know for certain that the Lord has sent his angel and has delivered me from the hand of Herod and from all the expectation of the Jewish people. So when he had considered this, he came to the house of Mary, the mother of John, whose name was Mark, where many were gathered together praying. And notice verse 10, the gate opened of its own on its own. This is a drama of intercession. It is prayer offered to God for Peter by the church. Listen, the church exists in a deadly conflict with the world, and its power to confront and conquer is in prayer. How much power did the disciples have in prayer? Well, they were about to find out. Look at verses 13 to 16. And as Peter knocked at the door of the gate, a girl named Rhoda came to answer. When she recognized Peter's voice, because of her gladness, she didn't open the gate, but ran in and announced that Peter stood before the gate. But they said to her, you're beside yourself. And yet she kept insisting that it was so. So they said, no, it's his angel. Now Peter continued knocking, and when they opened the door and saw him, they were astonished. Can you imagine the scene? God had answered their prayers. They knocked, God answered. Peter was standing at the door, and what did they say to Rhoda? You're crazy. Doesn't that make you feel good? The glamorized early church was no different than us. We pray, but are then slow to believe that God answers. James chapter 5, verse 16 down to verse 18. The effective, fervent prayer of a righteous man avails much. Elijah was a man with a nature like ours, and he prayed earnestly that it would not rain. And it did not rain on the land for 3 years and 6 months. And he prayed again, and the heaven gave rain, and the earth produced its fruit. The Apostle Paul believed in prayer, the prayers of the saints. He asked for prayer in every letter he wrote, except one, the one to the backslidden Galatians. Wow. Prayer not worth asking for, but he had confidence that the other churches had power. What about new Christians? Unfortunately, the church is littered with discarded disciples. 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 10. Demas has forsaken me, having loved this present world. Let me ask a question. Demas, when he was an infant Christian, when signs of decay set in, when the enemy was gaining ground, did we pray? Did we bear his burden on our hearts? Did we carry him to the throne of grace? Did we circle him with a wall of prayer? The images of childbirth, the twofold pain of childbirth, bringing the child into the world and bringing the child up in the world. The bearing lasting a few hours, but the rearing can last a lifetime. Paul understood this well. Galatians chapter 4, verse 19, my little children, for whom I labor in birth again until Christ is formed in you. Look at Philippians chapter 1, verses 3 through 7. I thank my God upon every remembrance of you, always in every prayer of mine, making request for you with all joy, for your fellowship in the gospel from the first day until now, being confident of this very thing, that he who has begun a good work in you will complete it until the last day of Jesus. Just as it is right for me to think this of you, of you all, because I have you in my heart, inasmuch as both in my chains and in the defense and confirmation of the gospel, you all are partakers with me of grace. The intercession of verse 4, making request for you. The declaration of verse 6, being confident of this very thing. Is there a connection? The gratefulness of chapter 4 and verse 10. But I rejoiced in the Lord greatly that now at last your care for me has flourished again. Look at Philippians 1 verse 19. For I know that this will turn out for my deliverance through your prayer and the supply of the Spirit of Jesus Christ. There were two instruments at work, the prayers of the saints and the supply of the Spirit. Likewise, the Spirit also helps in our weaknesses. Romans 8:26, for we do not know what we should pray as we ought, but the Spirit himself makes intercession for us with groanings which cannot be uttered. Prayers are as important as the supply of the Spirit. Here's Paul's thinking. The Philippians were praying for him. His letter would cause even more prayer. Their prayers would bring him blessing. And then look, finally, at 2 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 9 down to verse 11. Yes, We had the sentence of death in ourselves, that we should not trust in ourselves, but in God who raises the dead, who delivered us from so great a death, and does deliver us, in whom we trust that he will still deliver us. You also helping together in prayer for us, that marks may be given by many persons that on our behalf for the gift granted to us through many. Do you believe in the power of the saints' prayers? Do you? Do you believe in the power of the saints' prayers for intercession? You think about that, and you have a great day.